Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, alienated parents, grandparents, children worldwide, family members. Special guest tonight we have is Crystal Wilson and Antonella Giovanni. Antonella is from New York and Crystal is from Oklahoma. We are here tonight to talk about parent alienation and family domestic violence. It's a pandemic worldwide. I am in Canada, so here we have two different countries fighting for the same thing through our family court system. If people don't understand what parent alienation is, it's what one parent pits a child against the other parent to hate, to never see, and to lose that special bond between them. Sometimes it could be life, and what we're trying to do is to eliminate this in the family court system. So if you have any solutions out there to help us alienated parents, and it's moms and dads and grandparents. So it's not just one person being targeted, it's the whole world is out there, and one person through a divorce or separation will be alienated if we don't get our eggs in the basket and get educated quickly, because this is a pandemic and we have these two ladies here to help us. Antonella is going to be my host tonight, and she's going to be asking Crystal questions because they know each other. And I would feel better if Antonella could help us understand Crystal's story. So, Crystal and Antonella, thank you for joining me here on Let's Talk tonight. And I'm so sorry that you're going through this too. But Crystal has been alienated from one of her boys. She's got two. I just found out backstage, but one of them she was alienated from. It started in 2010, and he is now 21 years old. Antonella has been alienated from her children, four children, right, Antonella?
I have two.
Two.
Four and a
My
half
first.
years.
Oh, okay, 4.5 years. I'm sorry. So I'm going to start with Crystal to tell her story, and Antonella, you just ask a few questions for me.
Sure.
And if anybody out there would like to ask questions, put it in the question box, and we will answer what we can. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
So Crystal and I actually reached out to Crystal because there was a point in my case that, just by the courts and my ex-spouse alienating me from the children. And it got to the point where they had to figure out, what is one tactic or one attack that they can do um, to change custody, giving my ex-spouse full custody. And one was that they kept saying I was mentally ill. But there was a point where my ex-husband's attorney in court kind of threw in saying I had Munchausen syndrome, which, thankfully there was no evidence, or there was no any sort of evidence that I do have Munchausen, but there was no records that I was even, bringing the children to the doctors, or, claiming that they had any sort of illness. So I had asked Crystal to come on the podcast because I think it's important that people are educated, and the courts will find every little thing that they can to belittle you and to find ways to separate you from your child, or take or kidnap your child. So, Crystal, if you can just kind of tell us a little bit about your story, your situation, and what you went through, and what your son has gone through. And I know now he's an adult, so and he lives with you, correct?
Right now he's actually in school, so that's where he's at.
Okay.
So he's in Georgia and he's in school. He lived with me from birth up until about 2010 is when this whole thing got started. Um, he was a child who had some issues. Given that, I started going through a divorce, and I was having to work full time. And my ex-husband was abusive towards me. He had some PTSD issues because he served, in the military and came back, and he wouldn't get help with that issue, and it became abusive and not safe for me or him. So we divorced, and when we divorced, I was left, to care for my son. So I was working full time, at that time, going through nursing school and caring for him. And he was having some issues, and so we were referred to a child psychologist to see if there was some issues that she could help us resolve. And
Now,
so
not to cut you off, but when you said referred, was it through the court? Was it through?
this was through his primary care physician,
Okay, okay.
is who referred us there, because he was having some of these behavioral issues. And so she was like, well, let's just have, you guys are going through a lot. She was like, I kind of know what's all going on. Maybe you guys need, professional help that can help you with that. And I was like, okay, well, we'll do that. And that's kind of where this whole thing started. So we started seeing her. And before I knew it, she had me sending him to specialists for every little thing that he would say was wrong with him. And me being young and naive, I trusted the professional's opinion and guidance on what to do. Because I
So
had my,
let me just say, so they sent you to all these doctors and they said
yes,
you had Munchausen's.
yes, when
Wow.
all I did was exactly what they told me to do.
So they set you up.
Yes. And then
Sorry.
when I felt like it was too much, because they had me taking him to a genealogist, they had me taking him to the doctors for his blood, pulmonology, psychiatric. They had me literally taking him everywhere. And then when he was 5 was the first time she recommended I put him in an institution, which I was not comfortable with, because I'm like, he is 5. And she's like, well, this is what's best for him. And, me being his physician, if you neglect his care and things get worse, then you could be in trouble for his behaviors. So
Ma'am,
being,
can I ask you one thing? So while this was all happening and the pediatrician and the therapist were recommending all these specialists, was your well, I don't know if your ex-spouse at the time communicating with the
no,
pediatrician and the therapist?
no,
Okay.
whenever I filed for divorce, he left. Last thing I knew, he was in Utah.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
he just kind of just jumped ship and took off.
So they knew
Um,
you were a single parent, like
Right. And that I was
parent.
working full time and trying to care for him and trying to do everything I could, just to stay alive and to keep
Right.
him going and doing what we needed to do. And so I started taking him to all the specialists. And then when we got to seeing the child oncologist, where she sent me to next, because they started noticing drops in blood cell counts. And I started questioning her if some of the medications that she was prescribing him on could be causing some of these results to be this way. Well, that kind of made her a little bit uncomfortable, which made me feel uncomfortable, because you know how you can kind of sense when you're with someone. And I knew that she was new out of school. So I thought, well, maybe she's questioning a few things, you know what I mean? So I didn't think much of it. But the more I would ask her, before you send me to another specialist and I have to take off work again and explain to my boss why I'm having to take him here, can we see if the side effects are correlating with his issues? And of course, she didn't want to do that. So then, after about the 6th time, she had me institutionalize him. And I got frustrated with her because she would have me put him in a place. They would change his medicine. They would send him home. She would turn around and change them all over again and we'd be right. It was like a loop that we couldn't get out of, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her I didn't want to do it anymore. And I said, I'm not taking him to all these specialists anymore. I'm tired of you poking on him. I'm tired of you making his life difficult and mine, because I'm the one that's having to take him to all these places and
Right.
watch them do all of these things to him. And I have to watch him cry.
Mhm.
And that's again when she would threaten me. Well, if you do that, then I'd have to report you, because that's, that you're
Mhm.
neglecting his care. And, I'm a medical specialist and you need to do what I say. And after I had my second son, um, I just told her I was done. And I just told her, I said, I had fallen and I had a back injury. So my mom at the time was helping me with taking him to some of these places. And even she was like, Crystal, this is a lot. And I said, I know it is. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to keep doing this. I was like, I have my back injury, and she was coming from out of town to take him. And so after she threatened me that last time, you know how you kind of have that feeling. It's like a feeling where everything drops, and it's like your mother instinct kicks in, where you're like,
Yeah.
she's going to do it this time.
Mhm.
And I knew she was. So I asked my mom, if can I sign him to you? Will you take him before they take him?
Good for you.
And
Good
so
for
that's
you.
what we did. And then
And
the
did it
next,
work? Did that work?
briefly, I say
Mm.
that briefly
Briefly.
because
So would you recommend other parents to do the same thing?
I would,
You would? Okay.
because I do think it helped them stay off of me so much, but then it kind of turned it around where they visited my mom's house, and then I felt bad that now here they went to her house, you know what I mean? But luckily she was able to try to, kind of correct some of that, because she got him with some of the doctors there.
Oh,
And then
good.
it became the doctor there with the doctor that was here. And I'm glad I did it, because when it got heated for her, this was a few years down the road. And again, my son was in a different town, and I didn't get to spend the time I wanted to with him, because I wanted to move him back home. But I knew if I did, they were going to come back.
Mhm.
And they were still calling, there to make sure he was still being seen. And was he still living with grandma,
Mhm.
and things like that. So I knew I was being watched based off of that. And
Mhm.
I was like, if they get a hint that my mother has moved him back to me, they're going to be back on my door
Mhm.
trying to take him. And I feel like, now that we're years out looking back, I feel like she was so new at what she was doing. She was kind of experimenting, I hate to say that word, with the medication with him, um, because she was so new at it. And then I was vulnerable. I was, I was single mom. I was trying to work. I'm trying to take care of my son. I need help. And I just think, and the thing is I was on Sooner Care. So all these referrals, I could not have made these appointments. That's not how it works. When you're on governmental insurance, it requires proof from a physician on why you're asking to see a specialist.
Mhm.
So then she accused me of Munchausen syndrome when my son was no longer in her care and control, basically. And then
Ah,
I never had to go for testing, no psychological exams, nothing. And they did not come after my second son. And here we are 12 years later, and I still have custody of him. And my oldest is now an adult, and he's reached out to me and we talk, and all those things, but it will never make up for the time
no,
lapse
Right.
that was in between there. And
right.
so that's something that me and him, you know we've been talking about, and we're trying to bridge that gap. But what I will say is I am glad now, and my advice for any other parents that are having that gut instinct is keep the medical records. They're so important. And I say this because I was able to show my son the documents that I was given to validate what I was saying,
Mhm.
because it is hard for your child to think you don't want me, when that isn't the case.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yes.
So
That's the
having
truth.
those was my way of showing him, and, you know, setting in front of him and showing him this and him reading this.
Right.
And he understood then. And it was like, you know, that opened for us to have that connection back again. And
Mhm.
Good for you.
so, and I will say it will also help you because this case that they had, they never closed it for me. So it was still in review until last month. And I had to hire an attorney because they want to keep me with this. And they don't have any records to prove that I caused harm to my child. And I turned all that I have over to the attorney I hired, and she's offered it to them. And she's waiting to speak to their legal counsel because they don't want to open it because that would make it harder for them.
Mhm.
So medical records, if you're in this situation, keep them. Keep them for you, keep them for your children, keep them for like this situation, because now maybe this doctor will be brought into question. And I will say, I have looked her up and she's had not very kind reviews from other parents. And I have managed to keep those as well,
Mhm.
in hopes that if she has done this to someone else, then she needs to be held accountable because you
It's
can't just
repeat.
take, yes, you can't just take this doctor's word because
Right.
she's a doctor.
Yeah.
That's unfair to me. That's unfair to my son. And that's unfair to families everywhere. Just because you're a doctor, you get to say this about me.
Yeah. Repeat abuse through
Right.
the
And
system.
we were in this loop and there was no way to get out.
Wow. Wow. Unbelievable. So what are you doing now that you have your son? Are they close, the two boys now?
Not really. There's a little bit of an age gap. They're 8 years and 2 weeks apart. So he was
Okay.
hoping for his younger brother to be born on his birthday because there's a 2 week difference, but he didn't quite make it. But they're trying. But I think, you know, him being almost 21 and in college and, you know, introducing him to now my 12-year-old who thinks he's a teenager, even though he's not, you know,
Mhm.
they're kind of on different paths. Now, had they been able to grow up together and have had that, it may have been different. You know what I mean? Because I see
Right.
kids all the time that there's a 10-year plus gap and it's different. So it really is a lot like trying to know a new person.
Hmm.
And the
Antonella,
stories that
Yeah.
my youngest are saying, I didn't get to live those with him. And I
Right.
think that's another sore spot for him is because I'm getting to be the mom in the time that I wasn't able to be the mom for him.
Mhm.
yeah. So Antonella, can you relate to Crystal's children with your children? I know I can, but my children were alienated as teenagers. And when they're teenagers, they're already rebellious. So they were rebelling between the two parents now, trying to find their own selves, and they became trapped and became abusive. They're in their 30s, can't hold relationships.
Mhm.
They're alone. They don't have anyone to support them, no one to care for them. I see they're in poor health. They're close by to me, but they're shut right out. They're forced to not come and see me. And now that they're adults, I feel that they feel the shame, the guilt, because they were kind of nasty where they should never have been. They were loving kids, just like yours, Antonella. How
Mhm.
are your kids behaving?
My children, I mean, I don't know. When they were, with me, they've always been loving, and they're 4 years apart. I have, my daughter's older, so they definitely had, different interests. So there were times that they were a little separate. Um, I always encouraged them to be close and, and engage, and be, like brother and sister. But my ex did the opposite. almost like he purposely, had them go against each other. And
Yes.
then maybe because my daughter was very, well, mommy, 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 if ever there was a situation that if they did split and my daughter said, "Oh, I want to be with mommy," and he would try to keep my son. So he almost wanted them to not be close and to almost clash.
Wow.
And that's a narcissist. That's abuse.
That
That's
is,
all and he was
yes,
doing all that also in court. He was doing a lot.
right. Hold
Well,
that thought, Antonella. I just want to let the viewers know we have Andy Martens joining in. Andy's been off for a few weeks, well, a couple months now, few months. He's had issues with his wife and COVID.
Yeah, long
And
time, Mary.
what's that?
Can you hear me, Mary? Can you hear me,
We can.
Mary?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear him? Can you hear me?
Yeah, the broadcast is running on a bit of a lag. I can, but it's a lag on the broadcast right now.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But
So,
that's okay. I
how's your
mean,
wife
it's
doing?
doable. But there's great. Yeah, she's getting better, and I'll tell you, I've been doing these shows for a long time, but what I've lived through with the last 12 weeks with my wife that I've known for 40 years, almost 40 years, nothing compares to that. Even narcissism, parental alienation is a drop in a bucket because if your wife almost died and she's still here, um, that's something I challenge people. You want to live through that, spend 10 hours a day in the hospital for 12 weeks every day, 7 days a week. But you know all about that, Mary. We could do a show on that, family members
Yes.
being in the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, my brother too, necrosis fasciitis for 13 weeks, gets out of the hospital for a month, gets hit by a car, he's in there for another 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, the devastations we all go through is ridiculous, but we are strong, we're powerful, and we're here for everybody that's going through all this. And especially to the parents that are losing children. And Christmas is coming around the corner again, which is the most hardest part of not having our children with us. And these narcissists that are holding back these kids are just laughing underneath themselves. I mean, if you could think of the Joker on Batman, what does he do? I mean, he's that evil, scheming, conniving,
That's right.
manipulative
Yeah.
bad guy. And this is what we're dealing with. And it is so hard because it's mentally damaging us parents. You can imagine the poor children. So these kids, their immune systems are shutting down quicker, and COVID's around the corner. All these illnesses around the corner. I mean, I have guests that were on this
Oh, the
show.
hospital here where I am in Ontario is full. You think COVID was bad during the last 3 years? I got
No,
news for you. It's
I know.
coming back harder. But I get what Antonella is saying, all right? It's I've seen it in my own family on my wife's side, and it's something that will never go away, parental alienation, as you and I have done shows for a long time, Mary, and you just have to deal with it, to the best of your ability.
Well, what we need to do is educate these court systems because they're the ones that are enabling the children to be split. And if the court system sees that our children are damaged when they get older, becoming suicidal, murderers, they're stuck in jails. I mean, our jail cells are full of kids while they're adults, but saying that as a kid, they were alienated from a parent, dealing with, no support during crisis. So what do? They turn bad guys, bad girls, and end up in prison. That's not a life for our kids. This is not why
That's
we have
right.
kids, right? So, Andy, I want you to meet Crystal. She is a retired nurse, and she was accused of a lot of
Crystal,
bad
yeah. Hi,
things.
Crystal.
hi.
So,
Well, I
yeah.
was going to tell you on the parent
Yeah, let's hear
alienation one.
your story, Crystal.
that was the thing about it, is why my son ended up moving from my mom was my his biological father, my ex-husband. This is when he came back into the picture, and he got moved with him. And then that's another story, obviously, for alienation, because he was abusive to me. And this is where, for me, I also have years. But my son, with those records now, can see that some of the things that dad was saying wasn't the
Right, cool.
truth. And so I know that was a big downfall for, even on my side, was because when he left my mom's house, he went to his father's house, which, again, I was falsely accused of Munchausen. So he ended up with a narcissist raising him. And yeah,
How old was he when he ended up
he
going?
was 14 when
Oh
he
yeah,
went from
so
my
that's
mom
a
to him.
teenager.
Yeah,
So he was
my
those.
children. Yeah, my kids were that age too.
And he struggles as an adult, and that's one of the
Yeah,
things I think he's still right now is dealing with and struggling with. Is, I feel like, because he got put in those institutions, he saw worse things, and he will tell you that,
Yeah.
there,
Mm-hmm.
than
wow.
he ever experienced
His
around
innocence
me.
gone.
Right. And he said
Mm.
it was awful. And for her to put him in there 5, 6 times, and I have all
Wow.
the documents to show it, and for me to have to stand by and be told I can do nothing.
But can I ask what, while this was all happening, and then you said you here in New York we say CPS was involved. Obviously, there was court. You had to appear in court.
Right.
What was the court, saying about all this? Knowing
Initially,
that
they
your
gave
son's
me,
being being sent to institutions and being experimented. Um,
they believed in the doctor. She was a specialist, and I'm just the mom
right,
that took him to all these places. And, that was the thing I even brought up. I'm like, how can I? If he's on governmental insurance, it requires a referral from a doctor. You cannot just call a specialist and make an appointment and
right,
have the state
That's
pay for
right.
it. Like, because I was a single mom, I was struggling financially to keep a roof over our head. His dad wasn't in the picture. He wasn't paying, child support, insurance. So I went
you're on,
to
yeah,
get on insurance for him, and
yeah,
I had to have referrals from a physician for him to go to these places. And I'm like,
Hmm.
how am I willingly taking him to places when your facility, the state, is paying for these appointments because of a referral tied back to this doctor?
So
right.
And so
your story sounds like Take Care of Maya.
Taking care of
How
Maya.
Maya, have you heard that story? The mom actually committed suicide because they took her daughter,
Mm-hmm.
because the mom was taking her into the hospital. The mom was a nurse as well, and they
yeah,
accused her of child abuse. So Maya's trial is just happening. I don't know if it's over yet.
It's over. She
It's
won. Yeah,
over.
she won the
She
trial.
won. Good for her. I
uh,
mean, that's what your story sounds just like. But
it it's
your
very
son was
hard.
put into an institution where Maya was kept in a hospital away from her family.
And they would keep him for 3 months at a time.
And that's
And then they would send him out on different medicine. And she
Wow.
would and he'd be doing okay. And then they would refer to him, and we'd be like, okay, maybe we're in a good spot. And she would turn around and say, nope, we're going to change him to this. I'm like, why are we changing his medicine if he's doing okay? And she's like, because this medication, either it's difficult to get, or this isn't really meant for a child. And then she'd put him back on medicine he was already on. And I'd be like, why are we putting on medicine that you and I both know didn't work for him? And that's why you put him in a place. So I
Wow.
don't know if part of it was incentive driven by, did she get money from some of these places to
probably
put kids on
It
these
sounds
medications?
like it.
what it
And
sounds
she's
like.
like, well, let's just do it. Because I mean, and one of them was Risperdal, which we know now causes males to have breasts.
Huh.
Ooh,
My
really?
son is stuck with
That's
issues
that's a
like
bad
this
that's a
from
bad medication. Yeah.
a medication they
Wow.
put him on at 5 years of age that she felt was best for him to take. And that's another thing that he struggles with, is his own self appearance, because now he's
Mm.
hurt not only mentally, emotionally, but also physically
Physically.
They're
by
mutilating our kids.
Mhm.
by what this doctor did. And I'm basically told, she's a specialist and you have Munchausen, even though you've not seen anyone and we have no documents. And that's why my attorneys wants to speak to the legal counsel, is because she's like, she's asking them for the records and they won't
Right.
produce them. And
Right.
it's because they put it on a shelf for 12 years in review and they don't have them. Well, I have my records, but they don't want to see what I have. And
Right.
that's a problem. You can't be biased and go off of one person's opinion. You have to be unbiased and take into
Correct.
account all of the evidence and
Correct.
make a decision, not just because it suits your particular narrative or it makes your job easier. That's not, it's not up for CPS's job to be easy.
Right.
There are lives that are hanging in the balance, and it's unfair that it could be a caseworker who has no children of their own or is
Yes,
fresh out of school and they're making decisions when they
Yeah.
don't know what it's like to be a parent.
Right.
that's right. And did you know your son has up to 2 years to take them to court once he finds out all this stuff happened to him? And it was all through the court system. It's really serious stuff for your boy because he's damaged for life.
He is, and he'll say that, which that's one of the reasons why, I'd been trying to see if he would be willing to come on and talk, but I think it's a very sensitive subject for him still because
Yeah.
he's still trying to cope with the fact that, he looked at me, and he even has said this. He looked at me as his angel, and I protected him with everything I had.
Yeah.
And the person who did all that was ripped from him, and he
Mhm.
was thrown into a facility with kids of all ages, where he would share stories of being urinated on in his sleep.
Oh my God.
To, I showed up at one visit and he had a massive bruise, and it was bite marks from a kid that brutally attacked him
Mhm.
and bit him so bad. And I'm like, this is unacceptable. And I'm the crazy one.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
That's what they're trying. They're ruining our generation of children.
Right.
They're like turning them into zombies or something.
Well,
Like
he doesn't know how to function with other people sometimes, because I
right.
feel like with him, he's always like, what's going to happen next? It's always that sense of
That's
not feeling grounded.
right.
Wow. He's
Yeah.
walking
How
on
many
eggshells.
how many children do you have, Crystal?
I have two. The one that they're alleging that I have Munchausen with, he's now an adult. He's 20. And then I have a 12-year-old, which they did not touch him. I have him. And that's the other thing. I'm like, if I have Munchausen syndrome, how come I have this child who's completely healthy, who has no issues? You could call and talk to his doctors and stuff, and they would tell you, but
Right.
Does he have contact with his father
off and on. I
off and
think
on?
I think he right now, I think he's kind of lost. And, he's turned into an adult and he's working, he's trying to go to school. And I think he's trying to find his own way
I'm
right
Mhm.
talking about
now.
the 12-year-old.
No, I'm remarried to my husband and he's been with us
Oh,
the
so
whole
he's a
time.
different father?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Completely
Oh,
different father.
okay. Okay.
My
I did
oldest was
not know
my
that.
ex-husband.
Oh, okay. So your oldest is your okay. So that is so his relationship with his
Yeah.
dad, you were saying, is not good.
With the one I have at home is great. With the oldest one,
The
it's,
oldest.
it's
Wow.
rocky, especially now, being able to send my son those documents and show him evidence to back up what I'm saying. It's different when you're hearing from one person all the time, one story, so that you are fed to believe this is how it is and this is
Right.
all you know. And then you hand them and go, this isn't the truth. This is what was happening. I can prove this to you. And I know it's a lot to digest,
Yes.
but sometimes bandages have to be ripped off quickly. And I hate to say it like that, but it is what allowed us to have the little bit of a relationship we're trying to build now. Because I was able to say that's wrong and I can prove you it. Here it is.
Wow.
Mary, is it tougher for the child or the children going through parental alienation of what Crystal just said? You know, you've got that going on, and then I'm not trying to single out Crystal here by any means, but women get up and move on to another spouse or another man. So you're dealing with two moving parts here, the parental alienation and your mother or your father remarrying to somebody else. Uh, does that bring a challenge to the picture, in your opinion?
I believe it does to have a step parent, and if it's not a step parent and it's just relationship after a relationship after a relationship, but usually that's the narcissist who does that. And alienated parent doesn't go out seeking other partners before they get their children. But when it happens, we do fall in love again. And it doesn't mean it's because we don't know what we're doing or anything, but we don't need to be alone. We need to be
Right.
loved as well, right? I mean, everybody needs to be felt like they are worthy. So when we do get a partner that understands what's happening to our children and they're sympathetic to us feelings and they're helping us get our kids back. Whereas the narcissists, when they have a relationship, their partners are pushing our kids away from us. They're holding them back. So I'm sure Crystal, her new partner that has the 12-year-old boy, would more than happily bring the 21-year-old into the home to raise him as well, to make sure he's healthy, right? And Antonella as well, if you had a partner, I'm sure your partner would, because you wouldn't be picking someone that
Right.
wouldn't be there for your kids.
Correct.
We know differently. We've learned, we've been abused, we've gone through so much, and we're only looking out for the best interest of our children, where the narcissist is looking out for themselves. They don't care about the kids.
Right.
So if that
Narcissism,
answers your question,
yeah, narcissism is very selfish, as bottom line. And
yes.
Tanella, am I off base here by what I just mentioned about women moving on too fast after the parental alienation, and they're putting their children, dealing with parental alienation and then getting remarried, new boyfriend, new husband? Is that fair to the children to do that?
I mean, I think it just, if you find the right person and they're good people, it's a matter of, like, I have not found someone yet, and but if I find the right person, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong. Like Mary said, as long as they're supportive.
Right.
Um, it depends. It depends, on the child. But I don't think it's too much of an issue. I think, in the end,
And
you're dealing.
you're bang on,
You're dealing.
Antonella, what you just said. I've said this time and time again on these shows with Mary, and people that have parental alienation don't need to get on themselves. They've just picked the wrong person. That's what
Right.
I think it is. Or they were love bombed and suckered into a relationship that should have never happened.
Correct.
So that's lock, stock, and barrel, Antonella. That's what I think it is.
When you're dealing with a narcissist, they know how to, lure you in and they're charming, and they make you think they're looking for you out for your best interest. That's what my ex did. I thought he was like, oh my gosh, this guy is great. He's going to take care, like, I was like, this is great. And then once they have you and they find ways to almost you have to depend on them. Once they get you in that position, that's when you start seeing the other side, the other person,
Yeah, probably maybe
that's where you,
4 to 6
and then
months later, or less than a year later, for sure.
it could even take longer. These narcissists are very good at what they do, and they will plan this out for years if they have to. It's almost like, I can't explain it. I used to say, I think my ex gets like a high on planning these things out and finding ways to hurt me. It would be to the
Yeah.
point where I would just be home. I was a stay-home mom, and I would have plans, or we would have, even like if it was a family function and we would have to go somewhere, he would purposely fight with me, argue with me to ruin my day. Little things like that he took pleasure of. And it was almost like he would act like, oh, I'm so sorry, or like he would kind of cover it up as if, and then he's this great person again. And then it would be something else. And that's why they say narcissism is a personality disorder, because
Oh,
can
without
be
a
all
doubt.
different
Yeah.
kinds of, they can have all different kinds of personality. And so
Right.
when you're dealing with that through a divorce, and then there's children, and then, if you're unlucky and you go in front of a narcissist judge who then feels they have immunity and they're untouchable, then that's all. It's like,
Yeah. They're women haters. They're, misogynistic and all that. Because my ex used to tell me as soon as I got married, I'm going to leave you. When I'm 40, I'm going to leave you for two 20-year-olds, he used to tell me. And I'd like, who would, why? You first of all,
Yeah.
and two? Like I would throw it back at him, because you don't say that to your brand new wife, right? Or he would, when the kids came, when the kids are 16, this is exact words. When the kids are 16, I'm going to take them and you'll never know what I do with them. Every time he physically hurt them, sexually, whatever he did, that was his excuse all the time. So I literally had to stay with him, because if I left them, that's what I would get. And in order to see our children, when we're hearing stuff like that, we're brainwashed to stay there. And anybody that says, why didn't you leave? Don't ever say that to a survivor, because you don't know what's behind it, the scene. Because when we do say something and it gets back to that partner, you could end up with a knife in your throat, dead. I mean, it's serious stuff, because
It is, Marianne. I don't
it's
pretend to know
dangerous.
how serious, because I've never lived through it, but it
It's
is very
dangerous.
serious.
Yeah.
Well, there was a 2-year gap in between when my narcissist ex-husband, he had me in 3 months. So, in 3 months we got married, which should never have
Well,
done.
there's a danger sign right there, Crystal.
Right? You're right. But I was young and, 18, and I think I thought I knew the world, you know what I mean? And so I trusted that he was going to take care of me, as he said, leaving out of high school, all those things. And so, but also, so he was very much a narcissist, and I'm sure he still is. But also with my new husband, he did participate with some of the stuff with my older son, Hunter. There was a 2-year gap in between the time that he fled off to Utah and then to many other places that I had to pay bounty hunters pretty much to go try to find him, to even serve him with divorce papers and everything else. So that's during that time is when me and my new husband got together. And so he he was very much involved with my oldest son from the time he was 4 up until the time the state said we're going to take him, and even then after.
Wow.
So to him, he called him dad. He was 4, and he was a dad when my ex-husband wasn't. His biological father wasn't. And it's a sad situation. Again, it shouldn't be up to all these other people to make that decision. And
It
he's
shouldn't.
great. We've been together for 18 years. So I'd say he's, and that's my thing, is you just kind of got to find the right person, and he understood where I'm from.
Yeah.
My ex, actually, he's the one that um my ex came over to my apartment when we weren't together anymore, and he had actually called me, and he came over to my apartment and got me out of a closet where I was locked by my ex-husband.
Wow.
So I give him kudos on that. He
Yeah.
has kept me safe. He has kept our youngest son safe, and I don't doubt he would have done it with even him had CPS and everything else not have happened. And it just made it easier for my ex to get my son when he moved him to my mom's because they labeled me as crazy.
Right.
Well, they did it for revenge. But
Right.
ladies, we have about 10 minutes left. I want to ask you both about, you both went through the court system, how your life would have been different if the judge just gave you equal shared parenting. So Crystal, you first.
I honestly don't know how well that would have happened with my ex because
No, but if
with
if the judge did say to you that
I
day,
would have agreed to it, because I do feel like parents have a place to be in their child's life, regardless if it's on the dad's side or the mother's side. There's always going to be questions about where you come from, and there should always be a way that those parents, if they want to be a part of their life, they
so
should be
it's
able to answer
important.
those.
It's
Yes, I
important
think it's
then.
very important. I didn't know my biological father growing up.
Oh,
So I
okay.
have questions that I know I'm not going to get the answers to. And that's something I have to carry with me. And being in a situation of not knowing those and how it affects me, I would never want another child to not be able to have those questions answered because it doesn't go away. You always want to know the answers.
Yes.
So it's important that they both know, but also medical reasons. Should
So
something
you
later
were,
happen?
Right. Medical. Right.
yeah.
This
So
is
you were
a
an
letter to my
a-
children's
oh,
pediatrician because my ex is, holding me back of my children's medical and education. And I wrote these letters, both to the school and the pediatrician. And I'm like, you don't even have a history. You don't know the history on my side. So how
right.
would you know, or how would you even be, be able to, if there's an issue, be able to really, be able to, diagnose or care for my child if you don't even know. And you could even ask, and he could just go and ask my, with my family or whatever, but it doesn't matter because I have some medical issues, minor that my parents don't know about or my parents don't, what don't have, it's like, so it's important to have both parents involved, with the medical and the education because I may know something from and my ex would not, and a doctor probably wouldn't be able to diagnose it or even
When I think with
treat it.
CPS, I find it strange how in some situations, if it's a child that's born with parents who are drug abusers and they
Yeah.
put them up for adoption, they ask those birth parents if there's any medical things that they need
Yes.
to share for the child's life that they're
Correct.
adopted out to.
Right.
But then they turn around and say that doesn't apply to somebody else's children, and that's a catch back and forth. It's like, if it's a newborn, you ask me these questions, but because my 8-year-old has a medical issue, you can't ask me now. Shouldn't that apply all across the board? And what is the best, safest thing to answer these questions that have to do with your child than the people who they are created from?
Right.
Yes. The judge gave my ex-husband the children. He's a soldier, so he was never home. And my children were born in the Chernobyl. One of my children, the oldest, died of being contaminated. The other three, I had cancer, so they were born through it. And when the judge allowed the ex-husband to take the kids, he only gave me a phone call to my kids, and I was not allowed to go to get their school records or medical records. And he didn't care whether my children were children of Chernobyl, which they needed medical attention, which I did for 18 years, made sure they went for their physical checkups every single time. Right after I got alienated from my children, I found out 3 weeks after my youngest had surgery. She was in the hospital with serious medical attention there, and my ex-husband and his lawyer, Robert Haas, kept it from me. Phoned my lawyer 3 weeks later to say, oh, by the way, Ashley was in the hospital and had surgery. Where were you? And I'm like, what the heck? So what these judges are doing, allowing the alienator who has no clue on what their kids are,
Mm-hmm.
is damaging these kids more. And,
Right.
you know, so
My
what we need to
son,
do,
in his situation, he spent 2 years in Iraq. He was two. Like I got pregnant, had him. He went to Iraq for 2 years, came back to a 2-year-old, up and left because of the issues he was having. Then, he stepped in because he really didn't even know his bio dad. So when
yeah,
he got alienated from me, he was back in a situation with a stranger.
yeah, my kids too. For 18
And it's
years, they
like,
didn't,
I understand that, but he was not there for all these years. And
yeah,
because
Right.
you
Right.
yeah,
feel a certain way, I can't be there now. It's
yeah.
not acceptable. These
Well,
kids
that's what,
have issues.
yeah. And that's what happens. These alienators step in to become the hero and saying,
Right.
oh, I was there all the time, you know, but these judges don't ask questions. They don't care as long as, you know, money keeps bringing into the family court system by using our children. And they don't care whether our children are going to suffer any more damage than what they were dealing with. I mean, the children are losing a parent, and it's like death. We have hard times as adults losing our parents. So imagine teenagers, 2-year-olds, 3, 4, 5, all the way up. Like, what the heck, judges? Get a grip.
They don't have the bond we have. And that's how I
They
like
don't.
to say it.
Yes, they're
We become
jealous.
a
Maybe
mother.
I
Yeah,
believe maybe they're jealous that they
they're
can't
jealous.
have a bond like we have. I mean, I remember with the Judge Sherry Eisenpress in Rockland County Supreme Court. My case was in Supreme Court, never made it to family. Um, I every time my kids would ask for me, see me cry, they would retaliate. The judge would retaliate. My ex-husband would
Yeah,
retaliate. My daughter would have to beg her attorney, please, I want to see my mom on her birthday. I want to spend my birthday with my mom. I mean, it was like we had to go to, I mean, it was
uh,
ridiculous. My son wanted me to be class mom. The school asked me to be class mom. My ex took me to court to tell the judge to
Yeah.
order that I can't be class mom. This is what I was going to court for. I'm like,
yeah,
you're in here to get divorced and have share parenting time. What is going on? And how this Supreme Court judge is
yeah,
entertaining all this of
mine too.
court. I'm spending money on my attorney. He's spending money on his attorney so that he can ask the judge, I don't want her to be my son's class mom. These were the things that, I mean, it was just mind boggling. I'm like, I can't even believe. I knew where my case was going once I started. And that was in the beginning of my divorce. That wasn't, that was like a few months in, not even. So you can see that the courts are not there for the children's best interest. They're
They're
not
not.
there for being fair or allowing parents to move on and have, and continue to have a relationship with their kids and continue to move on and be able to, get a job or have a career or, start a new life with someone else. No, they're there to entertain all of this abuse. They're there to make money off this. Supreme Court makes a lot of money off
Yes, they
matrimony.
do. They made
Family
lots,
court
hundreds.
is paid by the state. They can
Yeah,
get an 18B. They can get paid by the state. But Supreme Court, you have to pay for stenographer if you want, a
everything.
script.
$175,000 for my trial.
Mhm.
18 years later. 18 years.
Yeah.
I was
And they did not.
alienated. And then the ex takes me back to trial to say I didn't want anything to do with my children. Is like, what are you for? Like, once they turn
Yeah.
18, what do you do?
They turn
They
that.
they
They
go
basically,
to find us. If you're a good mom and
yes.
those
Yes.
children know it, they will find you. And I
Yes.
that's
Oh, that
one
they
thing that
know.
I knew.
But the thing is, Crystal, my kids were to the trial and testified against me 18 years later and brought up all these brand new allegations and tried to get me back into prison because that's what my ex-husband did. He made the kids lie to the judge that I abused them and called the police. I went to jail. I fought it. I won. There was no allegations to be found. And then the family court judge, who was the Supreme Court judge from the criminal court, came into the picture just like that overnight and did the case, and then ended up giving the ex-husband the kids after asking, has the court case, the criminal case, been taken care of? Both lawyers said yes. And then the judge, well, let's talk about the house now. Well, what, because, and like a couple paragraphs before, the judge says if Mary proves innocent in criminal court, she will get everything. And then asked the next paragraph, was it taken care of? And both lawyers said yes. But he didn't care. Why not now? Now that
Because we're
it
a
was,
number. We are a
but
number to
that's
them. Our
it.
children are
Yeah.
a number.
They're a
They
number. You're
they do
right.
not want to associate a face and a heart to them. To them, this
Yeah,
is a file with a number. To
yeah.
us, it's our
One,
world.
2, 4, 8, 0, 5, excerpt 1. That's all my kids are. And this
And
is what
all
I
we see is
have.
the world when we see
Y-
our children. For them,
Yeah,
they see dollar signs and a case number.
yeah. And
Yes,
when
for
I was
remember.
when I was married to my ex-husband, I was nothing but 464 483 312. I was his sin. I wasn't Mary. I had no name. My kids had no name, and that brings them power because we are a nobody. Now this is sad. Like these numbers are ridiculous, and we are not identifiable
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening. That's what they're grooming our children to become unidentified because if
They
they go
don't want
missing,
attachment, is how
yeah,
I look at
if
it.
they go
If they
missing,
sever the attachment from the mothers and stuff, I feel like when they're
yes,
younger, then it allows these adults to be attached from
yes,
everything else. And
that's
I
where the
think
pedophiles come,
because
predators.
they've broken their psyche, they've broken
Yeah,
and attached that from
yeah,
them. So the
they,
soul that they have that's created within us that we give to them, we give them this life and they have it removed from them unwillingly, and
yes,
they are just completely vulnerable, and for them to think that they have the right to come in and just scoop them up and then set them to the side is not acceptable. These
it's
children
not.
deserve all of the love that God intended them to have by the parents that carried them and bore them, brought them into this earth, protect them and loved them until they were no longer able to. We are a
Yeah,
threat to them, and that's why they do what they do, is how I
that
look at it. The
that's right.
moment we question them and they feel like this person that they could take that was vulnerable stands up to them, that's when they have an issue, is because they know that now you're no longer vulnerable. Your voice is starting to matter. And if our voice goes over their voice, that's an issue for them.
Yes. So,
And that's what
ladies,
we need to have happen.
your last words. If you had something to say to your kids right now, what would you like to say to them, Crystal?
I love you, and he knows I love him, and I'm willing to do whatever I can. And, he deserves to have a decent life too. And he deserves, to know the truth. And he deserves to have the person who caused him a lot of these issues. She should have to face those consequences for her actions of what she's done, because he's forever changed by decisions she made.
Right.
Not that I made, but she made.
Yeah.
Thank you. Antonella, what would you say to your
I
children?
love, I love you, and same thing, my kids should be able to, even though they're children, should be able to still have a voice, be able to express their needs and wants, and and understand that, once they become older and they, hopefully they'll be able to process it more and understand what really happened and what's really going on. Same thing, like I hope eventually my ex, there should be consequences in the sense that, hopefully he will I want to say that maybe one day he will realize, his actions, and that and I always say maybe he'll, be able to be more at peace, and be able to apologize and be able to, be, you know more of a better person, because he's done a lot of damage and hurt, to me and the children.
Yeah. I'd
Hopefully.
like to say to my kids too the same thing. They know I love them. They know I was a good mom for them. And I know the kids want me in their life, but they're not allowed. So kids, break free, do what you can, have your own children, and then you'll realize the love that I had, you'll have for your children too. Don't break that bond. Don't let anyone break the bond of love. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining me here on Let's Talk Real Talk. I have to say goodbye to Andy Martens. I'm sure he had a situation to deal with at home. So thanks for joining in, Andy, Crystal, and Tanella. Thank you. Alienated parents out there, please don't give up on your children. Children, don't give up on your parents, and include the grandparents. Grandparents are special. They are what holds the bond together. Grandparents have a lot of love that they couldn't show us, but they will show the grandchildren because they got a second chance in life. Don't take that second chance away from the grandparents. They need their grandchildren. And alienated parents out there, please, please, please get help because what you're doing is child abuse. So until then, we thank you, Molly and I, from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to New York City and Oklahoma out there. Thank you. Support each other and come on to the show. PM me. I accept anybody and everybody who is dealing with parent alienation. If you're a doctor, a therapist, a lawyer, a police officer, judge, a lawyer, and if you can help us, alienated parents and children and grandparents, we would really, really love you to come and share whatever you can with us. So thanks again, and a happy Sunday evening to everybody out there. Thank you,
Thank you.
ladies.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Night.